Is this a topic, though, that is getting drowned out in all of the hubbub from the 2010 election? And this is the reason I asked this question. This is sort of, it's not sort of, this is on an international scale. You're talking about things that are not just the United States, they're on an international scale. When all the attention right now is going towards the Tea Party and deficits and taxes and domestic issues, that's really front and center in America's minds. People don't have jobs. We've got the foreclosure crisis. Is this message something that's getting drowned out by all the pressing needs we have here at home?
You know, there are always pressing needs. As human beings, as moral actors, we can multitask. But we can't turn a blind eye because of something else that comes along with the economy or with the environment or whatever else and say we're no longer concerned about our brothers and sisters that are suffering unnecessarily. If there's preventable suffering, we need to do what we can. And it's also totally consistent with everything from the United Nations Charter, the Geneva Accords, our own domestic legislation like the Anti-Torture Statute, like the War Crimes Act. There are these shared values that have been incorporated in these international agreements and in our domestic law and our Constitution that have been totally disregarded by both the Bush and the Obama administration. And so you can't just say, well, we want to get health care reform through, which they didn't get much reform through in my view, but you can't just use as an excuse, let's forget about the past. Let's forget about war crimes and torture and warrantless wiretapping of American citizens' communications, every instance of which was a felony under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. Let's just forget about them because, gee, we need to pass health care and we're afraid that there might be some partisan uproar because we're holding people accountable. You know, we used to have statesmen in this country and stateswomen, but there weren't many women in Congress at the time. But in the late 1970s, the Church Committee, named after Frank Church, senator from Idaho, a select committee came together. And these were Americans first and foremost. They weren't Republicans and Democrats. They were Americans. They were patriots. And they said if there have been abuses in our intelligence community, we're going to investigate them and we're going to disclose them. And with that, we will seek reform so they don't happen again. And we rose to that occasion, and it was a great moment in our democracy. When these abuses were disclosed, when there was accountability, and if not in terms of criminal prosecution, at least people knew. We found out, yeah, the CIA they hired the mafia to assassinate Fidel Castro. Yes, the FBI threatened Martin Luther King Jr., tried to blackmail him into suicide by illegally wiretapping and engaging in surveillance of his personal activities. The CIA was opening mail on a wholesale basis, totally unconstitutionally. All of that was disclosed. What a great thing. When there are abuses, and there are always going to be some abuses if people think they can get away with it, but finally to address it and then move on. But you can only move on if you know what the situation was and then do what you can to deter that kind of misconduct. Now the attitude seems to be, let's just cover it up. Let's sweep it under the rug. President Obama said he doesn't even want an investigation. How can we in a democracy, in a republic where we're supposed to have checks and balances, say we're not even interested in determining what it is that went on and let the American people know about it and let their representatives take action so these abuses don't happen in the future?
Let me get your thoughts on what's going on right now in American politics. Right now, I guess the flavor of the month is the Tea Party. What is your take of the Tea Party? What do you make of that? Do you think it's here for long term?
No, you know, I love civic engagement, but I think most of the people in the Tea Party, you don't hear a coherent message. I mean, they're anti-government, they're anti-deficits. Isn't it amazing when you have Republican presidents, the deficits don't matter to Republicans? You don't hear this from any of them. Where was the Tea Party when Bush was digging us deeper and deeper in debt than this nation has ever been during the Reagan administration? People, I think Gore Vidal was right, we're the United States of amnesia. Ronald Reagan dug us deeper into the deficit hole than this country has ever been up to that point. But, we heard from people like Senator Bennett say during the Bush years, deficits aren't a big deal. They don't really matter. And now all of a sudden, it's the first thing on everybody's minds. I've been one. Everybody thinks I'm the great bleeding heart liberal. I'm the most conservative person I know when it comes to fiscal matters, because I know that when you drive up these huge deficits, the first people to get hurt are the most vulnerable. And that's exactly what's happened. Where are these anti-deficit folks? When we're lied into a war, and we spend, it's not just $1 trillion for the wars at this point in Iraq, and I don't call them wars, they were invasions and occupations. But we've spent over $1 trillion so far. Well, we haven't actually paid it off. We've laid that debt off onto our children and later generations, and by the time it gets paid with all the accrued interest, it's going to be closer to $6 or $7 trillion. Where were these anti-deficit folks when we got involved on the basis of all these lies in invading and occupying Iraq, turning much of the Muslim world, understandably, against the United States? I think that most Tea Party folks are being incredibly manipulated by some multi-billionaires, the Koch brothers.
And we can get into that later. We're running out of time. One question I do want to ask you here before we finish up, though. Are you done with electoral politics? Are you going to run for anything? Because there's been speculation that we've got a 4th seat in Congress coming into play in Utah, and they may. One of the theories that I've heard is they may make it a seat that is much more liberal than the seat that Jim Matheson, whom you have railed against in a number of occasions, and actually almost advocated for his defeat in this last election.
No, I didn't almost. I advocated for his defeat because I think he's helped destroy the Utah Democratic Party, because they can't take a stand different than his, and his stands have been like so right-wing extreme. It's like almost right of the Tea Party in some instances. And by the way, Tea Party. You asked me about this, I've just got to say, these folks are advocating and voting in ways that are so contrary to their own interests. To say that we're going to continue these enormous tax breaks for the wealthiest in this country when our deficits and accumulated debt are skyrocketing, it's so unfair when people are going without in so many different ways, and we're going to extend these absolutely outlandish tax breaks for the wealthiest. Top 1% in this country, this is how bad it's got. The top 1% in this country have more net worth than the bottom 90%. And yet the Tea Party is comprised mostly of those people in the bottom 90%. And they're just getting absolutely snookered and manipulated by multi-billionaires like the Koch brothers. So when it comes to me running for public office, I don't intend ever to do that again. I think the most power is with the people in organizing, as High Road for Human Rights is doing, and building a movement that's not partisan. I'm sick and tired of both the Republican and Democratic Party. You may have gathered that by now. I think that we need to organize among ourselves, and we need to push and let our elected officials know that these things do matter to us, that we do care deeply about a restoration of the rule of law, about ending torture, about ending slavery worldwide. And slavery goes on in this country as well. But this isn't just about our country. Since when do our responsibilities as moral actors and human beings, and for some people, if they want to consider it as children of God, since when do political boundaries or geographical boundaries end our responsibility? If we know those things are going on and we can help prevent it, we've got a responsibility, and not just taking unilateral action, but getting the United States to provide the international leadership that it could have provided in every one of these instances to end these tragedies. That's where I think the power is, and I intend to my dying day to work on organizing people of goodwill, helping educate and provide tools so working together we can make major changes in human rights policies and practices of the United States, and again, not only in terms of what the United States alone does, but in the international impact that the United States has in bringing the international community together in addressing these human rights abuses.
We'll have to do this again. There's a lot more to talk about,
Okay.
but we are out of time. For
Good.
Salt Lake City Mayor
Thanks,
Rocky
Ryan.
Anderson,
It's good to see you
and head
again.
of High Road for Human
Thank you.
Rights. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.